Hello and welcome everyone to another Sales Hacker webinar. Thank you as always for hanging out with us. If this is your first Sales Hacker webinar, extra special welcome. And this is going to be a fun one. It's always amazing when I get to truly just catch up with a good friend and talk shop in these webinars. And what we're going to be talking about is designing the ultimate 2021 virtual sales kickoff. It's insane that we're already planning 2021. I feel like we all, I don't know, deserve a redo of 2020 or something. It went simultaneously the fastest year, but also the longest year, I think, of all time. And I am joined by my very good friend, Scott Ingram. Scott, welcome, man. How are you doing?
Always a pleasure, man. We don't get to do this enough. We were talking as we came into this thing. We haven't had very many conversations since the last time we were here. So I guess we'll just have to schedule more webinars so we can catch up.
Totally, man. We'll just always just do live catch-ups based around a topic. I'm in if you are. All right. So really quickly, take care of some housekeeping matters. So I can see everyone coming in now. Had some great reg for this one, which is amazing. Very topical conversation we're going to have. And so Scott and I, Scott Squared, have some points we really want to hit home. We are going to both discuss this, and we've got some kind of seed questions throughout we're going to run through. Now, that being said, although we don't do it often enough, I have Scott's cell, and I can call him anytime if we want to just catch up and talk about this ourselves. We do these for the community. So we really want you driving the conversation. And if you are tasked with building out your SKO, or you're a leader that doesn't know what that's going to look like next year, or you're an IC that it wants to bring new things to the table, please ask your questions. And there is a little Q&A at the bottom. I'll be manning that, and we're going to get those rolling right away. So we want you in the driver's seat. Second, it's always more fun when we know who we're actually hanging out with. So there is a chat feature. Come on in, introduce your name, your company, your title. It's always cool to see where people are joining us from and from which companies. What else am I missing? Oh, lastly, these are all recorded. So if you have to jump off for any reason, don't sweat it, don't stress. We'll have this in your inbox in roughly about 24 hours or so. And yeah, let's dive in. I see Melissa Stewart from Intro Hive, Sales Enablement, New Brunswick, Canada. Love seeing Canadians. Mikey from Vancouver. It's the Canadian takeover. Oh, another one. Canada, I love it. Canada in the house.
We got Brandy.
Right.
Brandy and I just met virtually this morning.
No way. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. Small world. Okay. She says, yes, we did. Cool. So let's kind of start. I want to actually start with a poll, and it'll be a bit of a provocative poll as we get into this. There's mixed feelings, and I'm gonna not say anything because sometimes I sway the poll results. And the poll is: do you think that a virtual SKO is a waste of time? Let's see what comes back.
This is insanely surprising. Although I guess the people who think the latter wouldn't be here.
This is true. This is true. All right. So cool.
This is insane.
This is super interesting. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So this is interesting, and maybe it's skewed because the people that are here are obviously investing in it and trying to make it awesome. So anecdotally, and Scott, I would love your thoughts on this. I've had now 2 separate people actually go through virtual SKOs or virtual kind of like team buildings, and they actually both came back and were like, that was a colossal waste of 2 days. And it's interesting because like it needs to happen. We need to foster these interesting spaces where people can collaborate, people can learn, but it's not a perfect transition from what we were doing in the old days into pushing that to digital. Are you hearing the same thing, Scott? Have you heard that out in the market at all?
I hear both. Actually. So, it all comes down to what we're going to talk about today. It's all about the design and the way that you're thinking about this. I think the way that a virtual sales kickoff fails epically is if you try and deliver the same content in the same way that you would in person, and you don't account at all for all of the differences that exist when there are virtual. Because when you do it that way, you've got way too much content, right? I mean, you kind of gave away part of the issue that was going on. Is it was a 2-day event, and while I'm getting ready to do a 2-day event next week, I took out a ton of the content. You know, when we do this event in person, it's 6 hours of content each day. I stripped that down to 4 so that we could have a lot more interactivity. And that's the other thing that's typically missing, is you're just expected to sit there and consume information. And I think this webinar is almost as long as any of us can sit still and try and absorb information. I mean, it's so hard to focus and just sit there in front of your computer and stay awake with content that's not interactive, that's not engaging, that just doesn't have something about it in a way that you can chat and discuss and do these things. So if you don't recognize that, if you just like, okay, here's the way we did it before, same amount of content, we're going to strap you to your chair for 2-3 days, that's going to suck.
Yeah, tons of great points in there. And let's quickly take a step back. And I want, if you could give the attendees, I like to call it the superhero origin story of Scott Ingram, and why you're uniquely set up to talk thoughtfully through this topic.
Yeah. So first about me, I am a quota-carrying individual contributor. I work for a professional services firm that works in and amongst the Oracle Marketing Cloud space. And about 4 years ago, started the Sales Success Stories podcast. That's that one, I think. Where I only interview number one, top 1% level individual contributors. So very deep, very long conversations. They're all incredible, right? It has really gotten to the heart of what true top performance looks like, not what it looks like when you try and average it all together and those kinds of things. And I started taking those folks, and we built a conference 3 years ago called the Sales Success Summit, where again, I wanted to hear from the people who are in the streets right now, on the streets, that's probably the wrong word, but performing at the highest levels, actually selling, not writing books about selling, not speaking about selling, but actually selling and actually performing in this market today. And not only put them on stage, but so much of that event is about the community and learning from each other. And what's so fun is it's the presenters that tend to get the most into it, right? Because you don't get to be the best if you're not a student of sales. And so they come into this, they're like, yeah, I'm presenting, but I'm here to learn more than anything else. And then obviously this year, we had to pivot to virtual. So, you know, I tried as hard as I could to try and make it so that we could do it in person, right? So as things were starting to get locked down in March and April, and we were looking at this, and I was having conversations with the community, at one point, I think I maybe did this in May, I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to limit capacity to this year's event. We're going to cut it at 50%. So the theater, we do it in a movie theater. The theater seats 200 people. I said, we're not going to sell more than 100 tickets. We'll leave every other seat empty. We're going to design some, I've got one here somewhere. We're going to design custom face masks, and we're going to do this safely. We're going to find a way to make it happen. Well, things continued a lot longer than I think any of us anticipated, certainly in the March, April, May sort of timeframe. Here we still are, still at home. And I realized, yeah, I can probably keep you safe. The numbers are actually looking pretty good here in Austin lately, but you still have to get here. You got to get on a plane. I'm not willing to get on a plane. I'm not going to ask anybody to do anything I'm not willing to do. So we've spent the last 6 months. I mean, it started at thinking about, okay, what does plan B look like, right? Just in case we have to deliver this virtually, what is that going to be? And then obviously, as we made the full-blown decision, we're now in a place that, and I pride myself on this event. It's a world-class event. It's a world-class experience that we really trying to deliver. So I set the bar for myself just extraordinarily high, because I'm like, we have to deliver that same amount of value. It still needs to be worth the $1,000 that many people paid to be a part of this event, even though they're going to be participating virtually. So that's kind of where we come into this, and this is going to be fun. So this is kind of a lot of the behind the scenes on some of the things that we're doing to make this event really special. And the reason we decided to have this conversation before the event, maybe we'll want to have a debrief, but the reason we wanted to have it before is so that you can now go be a part of it and see it next Monday and Tuesday. So because of our relationship with Outreach, with Sales Hacker, with Terry Berry, with Vidyard, with Gong, we've got some incredible sponsors, and we've actually set it up so that the live stream experience is available for free. So if you go to top1summit.com, you can get signed up and see in action a lot of the things that we're going to talk about. Now, you're not going to get the stuff in the mail and some of the other kind of special bits that we did for the paid participants, but you're going to be able to see and experience a lot of the things that we've done that I think are really different and are making this so that it's something that people are really looking forward to, more so than, oh, great, here comes another virtual summit. Like, I think we've all been watching lots of those. And that's the thing that's been frustrating me is these are not working right. I'm not willing to sit for that long and watch this stuff and not. The reason we go to events is to hang out with the people that are there. The reason we go to our annual sales meeting, well, beyond the point that we have to, is we want to connect with our peers. Like this might be the one time each year that we all get to see each other and be together and learn from each other and commiserate and just feel like you're part of a team and something bigger. And I think that's part of what we need to start thinking about as we're planning for 2021. How do we create that dynamic and reinforce the culture and reinforce that feeling of you're not completely on an island by yourself, you're part of a team?
Yeah, 100%. And I can't say enough incredible things about the Sales Success Summit. I was lucky enough to speak at it last year and made some truly life-changing connections with folks down there. The content was incredible. So do make sure you check it out next week. Okay, so there's a few things there. And one of the things you said is it's really about connections. And as someone I'll call it my former life now that COVID hit, who was on the road a lot, going to every sales conference known to mankind, I barely ever watch the content, ever.
Right.
Like,
yep.
Barring yours, because it was uniquely set up, and I really, wanted to hear from all the speakers, and it was like more intimate. I can count on like one hand the amount of times I sat in a full session. I was there to meet other people, see what other people are doing, and learn from peers. And that is a big part of, I think, what's missing in virtual events that we've seen today. So let's start at some of the learning. So you have to, and there's so many parallels, of course, between what you're putting on and a sales kickoff. You can basically, use the exact same framework and same model. What were some learnings? What was like the biggest headache from moving from in-person to digital?
Well, the headaches are all mine. I'm in the middle of it right now. This is like a really poorly scheduled webinar because we've got 4 days until I launch this event, and I'm in the middle of just absolute madness. And I think my hope is that with a virtual event like this, all of the work is done in advance. In theory, I kind of push play on Monday, and I get to be a part of the community and the conversation and all that happens. Whereas when I'm delivering this thing live, yeah, there's a lot of stress and a lot of prep and a lot of work up to the event, but then it's just it's live. I mean, it's there. You're dealing with all the issues in real time, and I'm sure that we'll have some as we're going through this, but it's just. It's different. And I don't know, it hasn't, for me, it's been, I wouldn't call it headaches. I mean, there are so many things that have come up and surprised me and gotten in the way. And almost every time, because I've got a great team that I work with, we've come up with something even better because of it. And so I think it really comes, I think we should take a step back and talk about really not just the why of this, but some of the how that ties to that why. So for example, we already talked a little bit about the trying to do it all like it were live over full days. I was sort of stuck in that structure because of the way that we had planned the event and the time that people had already committed. So we stuck with that. I don't think you need to do that with your sales kickoff. Again, it's an artifact of we spent a ton of money to bring everybody together, so we're going to make the most of all this time, and we're going to put this all together. Well, there's probably certain things that you want your team to do and take away and sort of enact or implement after you do your sales meeting, right? It's not just a boondoggle, right? There are business reasons why we do this, why we get together, right? We want to get people excited about the new products, but we've also got some new process and some new strategy and some new technique and some new messaging and all these different things that we want to impart. And if you think about it from a learning perspective, trying to put that in a lot of content in a row doesn't make sense. Like there's no time to process it and really learn it and practice it and do other things. So I think the opportunity is actually to spread out sales kickoff. I think sales kickoff can take place over weeks or even months, or maybe it happens all year long. Maybe you build enough of an inspiring, exciting environment and experience around what you're delivering that people look forward to the virtual sessions, and you can spread that out and also kind of gamify it. That's one of the things I didn't get to. I mean, if anything, a lot of my frustrations are, there's so much more I wish we could do, but there's only so much time. I actually do have a real day job, and you know, there's only so much that we can deliver. But it's when you think about ways that you could essentially gamify the whole thing, right? Can we gamify the leaderboard, right? The way that we sell is essentially a game. Can you make a game of the rest of it? And we've actually partnered with some folks, you know them well, you met them there last year, Scott, a couple of guys from Australia who've created a thing called the sales game. And they used to deliver that only in person and thought there's no way we could ever do this virtually. Well, COVID forced them to figure that out. And now we're playing the sales game as part of the sales success experience this year. So it's just being mindful. And I think it really starts with asking yourself why, right? What is the purpose of sales kickoff or this annual sales meeting? Why are we doing this? What do we want the outcomes to be? And starting from there and sort of getting rid of all of the other noise and, we've always done it this way and we've always done it that way. And just think more about what's going to make that possible. What's going to drive those outcomes given the tools and the opportunities you have. And there's a lot of things that I think are better virtually when executed well. Right. So if you imagine, I mean, Scott, you and I are very much the same. I can't tell you how many conferences I've gone to, and I've not seen a single session because my people were in the hallways. And so we wanted to replicate the hallway. But at the same time, if you're in that session and other than the very limited Q&A or the person sitting right next to you that you can whisper to, you can't really actively engage in the content. And so the opportunity that virtual presents is we decided to pre-record everything. It allows us to produce everything at a much higher level so that it doesn't look like this. It doesn't look like a freaking Zoom meeting because I think we're all sick and tired of Zoom meetings. So we're able to make it look different, but that it also means that you can ask the presenter a specific question while they're presenting. And if that were in person, that would be rude, especially if it was like specific to you. Or you could start like this small conversation and start riffing on this idea and building on it. Not something that you can do live, but something you can absolutely do in a virtual experience if you set it up right. So it's really being mindful of what are the opportunities now that present themselves to do these things, or even the networking stuff, even the hallway stuff. So much of that in the real world is totally random, right? This is the guy that I was standing in line with, or this is who I sat next to at the Salt Lick for dinner. But what if you could be more intentional about that? Right? What if you could group people based on different topics, different interests, where they're at in their career? Maybe you're pairing people up and you're helping junior sellers connect with more senior sellers to develop some mentoring relationships. You can be so much more intentional in this way, in ways that it's just too hard to control in a physical space.
Yeah, I mean, a million things to unpack there, starting with being highly intentional about the whole thing. You can tell when you put this conference together, you're highly intentional with everything, and that needs to happen when you're planning your sales kickoff. So a few things. One thing you mentioned there, which I want to highlight, make sure I underscore, is this kind of archaic thinking that came with us, that we need to pack everything into 1 day or 2 days or 3 days. And you're exactly right. That thinking came because you just spent a bunch of money on plane tickets and hotels. You only had a limited amount of time and you needed to get the most out of it. That doesn't happen. There's a very real world where you could spread your SKO over 3 weeks and have it from 4 to 5 end of people's day over the course of 3 weeks, and keep the momentum and the fire going longer. So that is a great point.
And Scott, before I forget, I'll also say a lot of this could be asynchronous. I think you just said, your friend said, hey, this was a waste of time. I could have been watching YouTube videos. What if it was YouTube videos? Or if you watch like me, I don't watch videos at regular speed. I speed them up 2 times so I can get through the content faster, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be, I think there's a lot of value in experiencing it together and having the conversation together. But if that's not required, let people watch it on their own time.
Totally. Yeah. And so I'm going to speak through the community too, because a lot of great questions came in as you were talking. And then I'll highlight a few things that I thought were super interesting. So here's B Sharp has a question, and it was about your gamification. So you mentioned gamification and you mentioned the sales game. And the question is, can you explain a little bit more about gamification? If you were planning on SKO, like how would you think about that, and talk through maybe its measures and outcomes that you'd get from gamification?
Yeah. So gamification, I'm going to talk about just like super loosely and broadly, right? There's lots of different tools you could use to potentially manage it. But in general, what you're doing is giving people points and rewarding people for doing certain activities. So I think, again, it comes back to the why and the outcomes, and what are we trying to drive towards? What are the activities that we want to reward? Right. So at some level, especially if you're going to do sort of the asynchronous thing that I just talked about, we probably want to reward the engagement and the participation and the fact that you were actually there and you actually consumed the content. Maybe there's a little quiz at the end. Maybe you have a little bit of fun with it, right? To make sure, like, did we make the key points? Maybe you get extra points for watching it again because it was good and that was relevant for you, or whatever that was. And again, it can be anything. As salespeople, we tend to be pretty wired based on competition, right? So the idea is you're then taking those points and you're building some type of leaderboard or some way that people can gain position and do the right things and do the right activities. So it's just a matter of determining what are the right activities, how do we want to reward it, how's that all going to work together. And I think the rewarding part of that can get to be a lot of fun. Because the other thing this is a whole separate topic, and I think you guys have actually done some webinars on this as well. There's no President's Club either. So how do we reward our top sellers when we can't send them to Hawaii? So there's a lot of different things where I think you can potentially put these ideas together where it's not just sales performance, but are you doing the right things? One of my favorite sales leaders of all time, he's now the CEO at Workfront, Alex Shootman. He would always talk about getting it done and doing it right. Right. And it's not enough to be making your numbers if you're doing it in a way where you're not doing business in the right way. Right. If you're doing a bunch of deals that are all going to churn next year, that doesn't help the business.
Yeah. And I'll give a quick example there because I think gamification is huge. And I look at one of the kind of the most exciting moments I remember at Outreach's SKO last year. We did that. We had some great presentations by Winning by Design, Jocko and his team, and they presented a lot of ideas and concepts, and not all of it is going to stick with you. But when you tell people, hey, we're going to do, some sort of quiz at the end, and there will be a leaderboard, and it'll be in front of the whole organization, and hey, we're going to have some super fun rewards, bar tabs on us, whatever it may be. It was super fun. People got competitive. People got excited about it. We used an app called Slido, I believe it was, which you can just log in on your phone, and then how quickly you answer it, you get a certain amount of points, and there was a leaderboard. So there's a ton that you can do with gamification. And really, it's just about getting people feeling a little bit competitive and not having people feel like bystanders, right? They're part of this experience. They're not just being, spoken to, which I like. I also really like this idea let's kind of go through this a little bit. And I would love to hear if you're doing anything at the Sales Success Summit, or theoretically, if you're maybe next year, this idea of grouping people based on their interests, pairing people up, mentors, because a lot of this stuff I find really interesting because it carries forward much past the event, which is huge, right? You pair someone up in a mentor relationship for like the 2 days or whatever it is, but if they click, that could be a thing that happens for 3 years, which has this compounding effect. Walk me through the way you thought about, making those, we'll call them bathroom connections, those odd connections that you never thought would happen that turned into something special.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing that I'll say, one of the ways that I think about this is typically the half-life of an event is like a day, right? You get all fired up. You're like, oh, that was so amazing. We're going to conquer the world. And then the next day you're like kind of there. And then a week later is gone. And I really like to think about, how do you extend that half-life? Can we make the half-life up 2 months long? And I think, Scott, you've seen it. I mean, we've been able to do that a lot in what we've created around the summit. So that's a piece of it. The other thing, we're having so much fun. So in this platform that we're going to be using next week in the summit, we have been able to design sort of a custom networking floor. Like, we've built our own floor plan, and we just had a lot of fun being creative within that and naming spaces based on things that would likely be of interest to people. So there's the prospecting parlor and the LinkedIn Lagoon and the big deal brainstorm and the leadership lounge. And there's just, we did it by naming spaces so that people could just go be in the place that they're going to find the content that they're most interested in. So that's one way. We didn't get to some of the other ways, although we're going to do a follow-up event. So usually when I produce this event, when it's live, I try and leave a little bit of the end of the agenda open so that we can react to whatever happens. Like, there's always there's a big burning question, or everybody's like, we need more of that particular presenter because that was so good. We want to go deeper. We want to do a Q&A with them. We want something. And so I didn't want to do that and try and plan for that virtually. So we're just doing a follow-up. We're going to do a 3-hour session 2.5 weeks later where we can do that. And the way that we're going to organize people then, in addition to some of those conversations, is we're using the Gallup Strengths Finder process. Because a lot of what we have seen in top performing sales professionals is they have a really deep understanding of themselves, and they've really gone deep on their strengths. Like, they leverage what they're great at all the time. So we wanted to help people first understand, like, what are my strengths? Here's a methodology to do that. So we're going to send everybody those codes so they can go take those tests. And then we're going to organize the tables based on those strengths. So now I can have a conversation about, what, this is an area that I'm pretty good, but I think I could be stronger. Let me collaborate with other people who share that strength. And it's just another dynamic. Like, I think what you're looking for is different dynamics in ways that you can connect people that are relevant and maybe not so obvious, right? Maybe you're thinking from a sales kickoff perspective, you're thinking more broadly across the organization, right? Because this doesn't need to be just sales, right? We're bringing marketing to the table. We're bringing product to the table. We're bringing customer success and other parts of the organization. If you can create ways that we can build those relationships, that has so much value to the organization for that cross-pollination to happen, right? So just thinking about it in different ways. We didn't get into the speed networking and some of those things. I mean, we thought about it, but I think it's a little bit cliche, and we can probably provide value based on intent a little bit more.
I like that. I like that a lot. And Melissa has some great comments here. They did daily competitions with different pitches, analogies, objection handling, and did emoji voting in Slack. So that's a super creative way to get people involved. All right, we've got some questions about SKO exec keynotes, live versus recorded, and tips on how to make recorded sessions more engaging. So I think that's a great question. Before we get to that one, I'm going to sneak this question in just so you can flex your sales muscle a little bit here, Scott. You've got your event coordinator and founder hat on. I'm going to get you to take it off and put your sales guy hat on, because we got a question from Sam, and I think Sam might be in the wrong webinar. I'm not sure, but she said, I'm very excited to hear more about what I can be doing on my demos to ensure that follow-ups do not ghost. Seems like there's a lot of window shoppers recently, and nothing is worse than a no-show. What do you do about no-show, Scott? Quickly, and then we'll get back to that.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out if that was a before or after. To prevent the no-show from not attending a demo, I'm all about confirming all of my meetings first thing in the morning, right? Because if I'm going to get blown off, I want to know it so that I can make productive use of the rest of the day. So hopefully you're confirming that, but giving them something, like making them curious about something that they're going to learn, that they're going to get out of that session. So there's my quick how to not get ghosted going into your demo question.
I like that. Yeah. So like one sentence on pique their curiosity and then confirmation. I think that's a great way to do it. All right, back to the topic at hand. SKO keynotes, live, recorded. How do we make these things engaging?
So here's my theory. My theory is that when you put somebody on stage at the big live event, right? The whole sales team is there. There's a lot of pressure on that, and the amount of prep that they're going to do is really high. For whatever reason, I think that goes away if you do a session that looks like this, because I'll be honest, I didn't do very much prep for this. Like, hey, I'm going to talk with Scott. We'll share some great ideas. It'll be super useful. I took a couple of notes. I didn't put nearly the energy into it that I would have if Sales Hacker put me on stage in front of 500 people and I had to build a deck and all those things. Because of that, I believe that pre-recording has value. What we did is we actually sent a production company out to the homes of each of our presenters, put them in front of a green screen, good lighting, good audio, the whole freaking bit, because I knew it would cause them to take it more seriously than if they were just getting ready to do sort of a live. I don't know why psychologically that's different, but it is. The other thing that we're doing is, and I stole this from Peloton. I know, Scott, just off your right shoulder is your Peloton. As I was thinking about this content, I made a couple of decisions. One was, and this is probably not totally relevant to the sales kickoff thing, but maybe. So one is I decided not to offer the recordings afterwards because people don't show up when they know that the recording can be there afterwards. And I know that a lot of the value that we're going to deliver is in the moment and in those conversations. So I'm like, if you want to see it, you got to be there. That said, we're going to take all of the content, and in Peloton, there's this theory of an encore class. So what they do is they take a class that's already happened, that's been on demand for a while, but they put it back on the schedule and they run it again like it's live with its own leaderboard. And I thought that's a really good, interesting idea. So what we're going to do with that in Q1 is we're going to run an entire encore series. So we're going to rerun the sessions. But what's really interesting about this is two things. One, the speaker who gave that original presentation will be there in the chat to answer those questions. So from a reinforced learning perspective, right? If you already saw it one time, but now you've had a couple of months to practice and try and implement, and now you're ready to go deeper into that learning, how great would it be to re-experience that content, ask the presenter deeper levels of questions, engage with your peers and the rest of the community in that deeper way, and then follow that with the live Q&A. Right now, so I think you can find this right mix of pre-recorded because of the higher production value, because of the higher quality, but still mix in the live from a Q&A perspective so that you don't miss some of what Scott and I are doing right now and able to answer your questions live, which if everything's pre-recorded, you get some of it in the chat, but now it's just a little bit deeper, a little bit more personal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. And to your earlier point too, of just like, if you do go for that higher production value, it's different, right? We're all on 8 hours of Zooms a day, 10 hours of Zooms a day or whatever. So it's just different enough that people kind of lean in for a while. And to your point, having people ask questions while they're on it on Slack or through Slido or whatever, you could even set up a 30-minute live session after, the well-produced, keynote, where people could upvote the questions, and then you run through like the top 8 or something. I like that, and that's kind of what we did for Unleash, and we'll see what we do for SKO. All right, here's a question from Matthew. So it sounds like you're designing more of kind of like a customer conference, call it. How would your design planning efforts differ when you were designing for your own users? I'll try and answer that. I think you look at the people in the sales success community as your quote unquote users, or right, more or less.
Yeah, I mean, let's keep this like on point, right? Because we are talking about sales kickoff, right? So yeah, this is a little bit different. It's a voluntary experience. It's a little bit of a different thing. I don't know that it changes a whole lot of the strategies though, right? It's like, what's the why? What are we trying to accomplish? How do we get creative around that with the tools and the experience we have? And one of the things, Scott, I want to talk about that's maybe relevant and helpful there is thinking about how do we think about the experience part of this, right? Part of what makes a traditional sales kickoff work is it is a shared experience. And it's like, you knew what city you were in, and you remember, we went to this restaurant and we drank out of our shoes and we did all this other stuff that sort of anchors the learning and the content and the people and the networking and all of those different things. You need to think about, how do you differentiate that experience from the experience of every day, which is why I'm not doing a single thing in Zoom, because we experience Zoom all the time. There's no way to differentiate. Well, was that the Sales Success Summit? Was that that thing, this thing? You've got to break that apart. And Scott, you experienced this. I mailed a box to all of our paid attendees that we called a Sales Success Experience Kit, like branded in the, don't zoom in too close because I don't want them scanning your QR code, Scott. But I put a label in that lid with a QR code, and that QR code links to a Vidyard video from me with a personalized message to Scott. So for each of our attendees, I recorded that. And what I wanted to do, and there's swag from our sponsors in there and other stuff to enhance people's experience. So for example, in our sessions, we can use something like this. Just to visually share what's going on, right? Vidyard's one of our sponsors, so they've got a real nice little dry erase whiteboard in there. So cool, people can visually write comments instead of in the chat, and we can interact in those ways. So I wanted to also include some things, and there's some little nutrition packets in there from my friends at Mantra Labs and some other really interesting things, where again, I'm trying to create that shared experience and make it physical and make it tangible and connect the virtual world that we're living in all the time, and just reminding people like we're real. There's real humans behind this. We care about you. We want you to be successful. You're part of this community. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity in doing some creative things like that. And I've heard a lot of examples of, we're going to have our own custom drink, and we're going to bring a mixologist. We're going to put all the ingredients in the mail to all of our attendees, and we're all going to make this drink together, or we're going to make this meal together, or there's so many different things like that, where if you can make it something that we're actively doing together, that is not actively sitting on our butts together in front of a computer screen, right? There may be some element of that, but how do you get more creative and break out of that and do things that show like you care, we want you involved, here's unique ways that we can participate in this.
Yeah, I love that. And something that popped into my head there as you were talking, and looking for the positive. So the things that we can do in this environment that we can't do in the old environment. And when you were talking about like, wow, how cool would it be if we like all made a meal together and there was a recipe and things were sent. And what's unique to that is you could never cook in your own kitchen with your whole team, with like maybe your family. You can get people's families involved, which is really interesting and really cool and very powerful, because your significant other, your children are obviously your whole world, and it's kind of this side that like no one sees, right? Because they can't fly your whole family into wherever you're doing it. So that's a really interesting thing too. That's a net positive that wasn't really available before. All right, we got a bunch of great questions coming in, and we're going to try and keep this to roughly 45 minutes. We might go a little bit over, but I do want to get to these questions because they're great. So first one, what do you think about awards? I'm actively trying to figure out how to replicate-ish an awards dinner. Tough one. Thoughts on that?
It's just a tough one. I mean, honestly, awards dinners are only enjoyable when you're walking across the stage. The rest of it kind of sucks. I mean, even the in-person part of that, I don't think is super compelling. So I think it's the way I would do it. And maybe this is just because I'm so like stories wired. I would run through the awards. Like, you want to do the recognition, you want to celebrate the people. So create fun custom graphics. Melissa Madian, who does actually this type of work as well, right? She does work on sales kickoffs. She was running enablement for us when I was at Eloqua. And one of the things that she would do that was absolutely brilliant is she found an artist who would make like Simpsons-esque caricatures. And so I think if you can recognize people in unique ways, where like the only way to get something like that is to have done something, right? To have gotten an award. So think about being creative and visually or in video from that perspective. But then I think there's the opportunity to turn that around. And again, I think you can manage this probably better from a pre-recorded standpoint. Do short acceptance speeches, but have it be focused on like, what was it that helped you get this, right? Where it's just like a quick single tip. Look, you've got 30 seconds or you've got a minute. Share with the team, get them expired, share something unique about yourself. And they can be super creative about that and show some of their personality and what's going on and give back, rather than, okay, we're all going to stand up and clap as they walk across the stage and take their award and shake the CEO's hand and repeat. That, again, it's one of those things where I think there's a big opportunity to think about, what are we actually trying to accomplish and what's the best way to do that, and how can we get creative given this environment? Yeah,
I love that. And I think there's also an opportunity to kind of, I think if I was doing it, make them almost like Easter eggs through the content.
Scott, have you found your Easter egg?
I don't think I have yet.
You need to examine your box a little bit more closely.
Okay, I will do that. But like, how cool would it be if you have your content and you just say up front, be like, hey, throughout the day, throughout the content, we're going to be giving out some awards, and then you do a small video from the person's manager about the amazing thing that they have done. Right. And if you're on that team, you're probably going to be a little more engaged. Because like, what if I won an award? What if like I'm up there? That would be so cool. And then like getting to see the feedback from your colleagues is pretty cool. I will examine my box further after this. Okay. Robert Fisher has a great question. We always tend to focus on what you should do, but determining what not to do can often be even more impactful. I'm curious to get your feedback on what you feel you definitely should not do in SKO/virtual SKO. We talked about a few of them. What's like the biggest one that you're like, this would be catastrophic if we just did this?
I think we've talked about it. I mean, honestly, I think the catastrophic is just expecting the people to sit still and watch content, whether it's live or pre-recorded. At that point, it doesn't really matter, right? You've got to find ways to make this relevant, make it interactive, make it an experience. Sorry to beat the drum on that, but that's really where I keep coming back to.
Totally.
And
if people are sitting
here's
through
the thing,
8
like
hours of
I
Zooms,
put myself in these shoes, right? Is this something that I'm going to enjoy and get value from and look forward to and be excited about, right? That you've kind of got to develop your own avatar in that way and build for that. That's the way to solve all the BS, right? Because if you're like, God, this would suck. I wouldn't want to be a part of this. And put on those glasses, put on those shoes. That's going to help a lot.
Totally. It's funny that we don't always do that. It's like, is this something that if someone forced me to sit through for 2 days, would I want to do this? Of course, there's business reasons, but there's no reason we can't make it enjoyable, actionable. All right, last question I'm going to sneak in because it's a great one. Melissa, thank you for the question. What are your thoughts on pre-work to welcome people to the SKO, set the theme, logistics? And then on that note, is this theme even more important than meeting virtually to tie all the content together?
Could be. The theme I'll give or take, but I think that the way I once wrote a book on this topic. I wrote a book called Making Rain with Events. And you have to think about the way that I structured virtually every story in that book is intentionally thinking about what happens before, what happens during, and what happens after. And that's the way that you need to plan. So absolutely, if there are things that people can do to prepare, to do their homework, to do their preparation, that especially if it's going to enhance their experience, or if they're going to share it, like, hey, the best ones are we're going to grab you and we're going to ask you to share this live on stage, or not share it, or whatever the dynamic is. And then I'd say more importantly, it's all in the follow through. Like, what happens after? How do you keep this going? How do we extend that half-life to make this something that, okay, it's not just this rah hype session and 2 days later I'm back to the same old thing. How do we actually reinforce the change that we're probably trying to drive? Like, if you really examine your why, you're probably trying to drive some type of transformation within your sales team. What is that? And how do we think about that before, during, and after as we're doing our planning, as we're doing our design?
I love that. I think that is a perfect place to wrap up, is make sure before, during, and after is all tied to that why, that outcome that you're trying to drive. Well, Scott, thank you so much for hanging out with the community. It's always a blast, man. That was really fun and super insightful. I wish you the best of luck next week. I hope that you are able to just press play and hang out. As a guy who's been around a couple, I'm not sure
it's
that's
wishful thinking,
but I really hope that happens for you. I am certainly going to stop by and say hello and network and check some of it out. And for everyone on this, do go check it out. Incredible content. Again, can't say enough about it. But thank you, man. Anything else you want to push people towards? Go check out the Sales Success Stories podcast, of course.
Yeah. I would just say, again, this has been a lot of talk. Why don't you come and look and see what we're doing and sort of experience it and bring some inspiration from that. So again, free to sign up, thanks to our friends at Outreach and Sales Hacker. So top1summit.com will take you there. And then if you want to talk about this, I think this may be part of our future. I think we may be doing some work and some strategy and potentially even some execution around this. So if that's something you'd be interested in talking about, send me an email, scott@top1.fm, or hit me up on LinkedIn. Would love to chat with you. I don't have all the answers yet. And if you would, wait till like after next Thursday, once I've had a chance to sleep.
I love it. Thanks again. And thank you all for joining us. Thanks for the thoughtful questions as always. We'll see you again.